Hello, everyone. Welcome to Mastering Midlife, How to Thrive When the World Asks the Most of You, the podcast hosted by me, Mark Silverman. Today, I've asked Dallas Burnett to be on the show. I found Dallas on LinkedIn when he launched his book, Move, From Where You Are to Where You Want to Be. I started reading Dallas's writing and his philosophies, and I said, this is a kindred spirit. This is a guy who knows what it's like to enter midlife. So Dallas started as a successful engineer and businessman, and he's been keeping a notebook for years of what he's learned going through the motions of a career. And the result is this book and this new philosophy and this coaching practice. Dallas, welcome to the show. Thank you.
Oh, thanks for having me, Mark. I appreciate you for having me on the podcast. I'm excited. This is going to be fun.
Well, so I really appreciate it, and I did need a Southern accent to just kind of broaden my appeal. Dallas, so tell me, what brought you to this moment where the book was published last month, and it's amazing, by the way. What brought you to this realization and this shift in your career?
So I was at the time a few years ago. I was running a new startup company. It was a fully funded from a venture capital company, and we were fast growing, fast moving, and I had worked kind of my career to that point. It was very challenging, very difficult, but we were having success. And so, you kind of put a lot of apples in that basket. And so, even though the company was successful, the founder and the board started having some of these major difficulties. And what ended up resulting was the company that I was leading and had led for several years, I ended up having to leave and resign, even though everything was good. And so I was left in this position where there was no real plan B. And I had put myself out there, blood, sweat, and tears for several years, and invested a lot into my career, into getting to that point. And then, walked out the door one day and was just like, Friday I was getting, 100 emails every day, and Monday the phone wasn't ringing. And so it was a stark difference. And what really ended up happening was I started realizing this formula that I had kind of put together in my head, this hard work and, great business and a little bit of luck and an equal success. And then, so when that formula didn't work out, it was just like I had this moment. And, I kind of start off in the book by calling it my now what moment. And, we all have those. And that's kind of what led me to write the book. I had been coaching employees for years, and we had hired a bunch of millennials and was helping them kind of hit the ground running in this startup. And so I said, I've got to write this book, but it was one of those books that I was writing for me as much as anybody else. So it was like a process that I had to go through after that, to kind of launch or relaunch, So.
Sure. So it's funny because I wrote my book, Only Tens, for myself. I thought I would sell one copy to myself, right? And it's still selling a few hundred copies a month.
Oh, that's awesome.
Because I wrote this for me as a way for me to work through. And then when I was reading your book, and you talked about the fact that you kept a notebook over the years of the wisdom that you gained, of the pivots. And then when this now what moment, when you're doing everything right, what happens when you're doing everything right?
Yes.
And that isn't right.
Yes.
Doesn't work. Now what?
Yes.
So you've had this epiphany. You're like, I did everything right. It's not working. There's no phone calls coming in. What do you do now?
Yeah. So that's kind of where we pick up, because and then I start off and move talking about that. This is a gap, and you know this because you coach a lot of executives. When you're approaching someone, what you're really trying to discover and help them discover is a gap. Because it's something that they're either trying to achieve or something that's missing, something they lack, and you're trying to kind of flesh that out and understand, first of all, where they are, and then they've got to have somewhere where they want to be. Whether it's a mindset shift or whether it's some type of a career change, or whether it's some type of whatever it is, there's something that they're lacking. And as a coach, you're going to come alongside them and help them gain that insight. So it's understanding, just trying to understand what is my gaps? Where am I lacking? What are those things that I need to be working through personally? But then, ultimately you have to start with clarity, and that's where the first pillar and move comes in, is that
before you go on, can you just, you put this in the form of 4 pillars. What are the 4 pillars?
Yeah, the 4 pillars are seek clarity, and then we want to develop boundaries, we want to elevate accountability, and then we want to intentionally execute. So those are the 4 pillars of move, and we kind of take those apart, and there's 2 or 3 chapters in each of those pillars through the book. But the first one is clarity for a reason. They all kind of flow because everything flows from clarity. When you have clarity on something, then the other pieces can start falling. It's just a matter of lining everything up after that. One of the most difficult things, though, I find with people is that clarity is a very, very elusive, or they don't take the time to define.
It takes work. It takes work.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
I talk about all these books, getting things done, essentialism, how to motivate, all these things, when the first step is often missed. What
Absolutely.
do you want? Where do you need to go? What is the gap you're trying to cross?
That's
and
exactly
why are you crossing it?
Most people, when you talk to people, one of the hardest things for people to nail down is exactly what you just said. What do you want? What do you want? And so it's easy because the quick answer, I want $1 million. Do you want $1 million? Do you want to work 2 jobs for the next 10 years, or do you want to eat, rice and beans and go Dave Ramsey and live out of envelopes and sell everything and live in a 1-bedroom apartment and, this and this and kind of change your lifestyle for the next 10 years? Because if you did, you could be a millionaire. No, I don't want to do that. Okay, well then how bad do you want that, right?
It's funny because often people think it's fear, and it's not so much fear. It's, do I want to suffer whatever consequences they are?
Yes.
Right? Do I want to pay the price to get to where I want to go?
That's exactly right. I remember hearing the 60-minute interview with Tom Brady, and a few years ago after he'd won like three Super Bowls, and he was like, he was kind of reluctant, and the guy was like, you're on top of the world. You're married to a supermodel. You got all these Super Bowl rings. You're wealthy. All this stuff. And he's like, well, yeah. He goes, all my dreams come true. But he's like, hey, I wanted this, but you can't have this without that. Right. And it's just what you're saying is that you can't have fame without being mobbed when you go to the restaurant. He goes, sometimes I just want to go to a restaurant and eat, but I got to be up to go to a restaurant because I'm Tom Brady, And so it's totally what you're saying. Do you know what you want? And do you really want what you think you want? That's tough. That's tough to come up with.
Those are the harder questions. Okay. So now you gain clarity. You know what you want. You know what the gap is. You know what it's going to cost to get where you say you want to go. Now what?
Yeah. So when we talk about clarity, we kind of outline that in the book and kind of what it takes to go through a process. Because I didn't want to just say, hey, seek clarity and then, leave the reader hanging. So we kind of unpack that a lot in the book, and we go through that because it's so important. But the next thing, when you go through clarity and you feel like you've got a pretty good understanding, and again, one of the things in clarity is clarity begets clarity. So as one of the things when you come out of college, let's say you come out of college, and this is why I think midlife is this is one of the benefits, right? Is because when you come out of college and you say, I don't know what I want to do with my career. I don't know when I grow up. One of the things that when I talk to people, it's just like, well, do something. If you can't find if you don't know exactly what you love, then you can at least start marking things off that you don't like, you don't like, or that don't align with what you're doing. But you got to do something. Don't do nothing, right? And so just start moving, because the more you do and the more experiences you have and the more you grow, the more you're going to refine what that is. You may not know when you're in 6th grade that you want to go be an elementary school teacher or a doctor, because some people do. Some people have that clarity and they just go through and that's what they do in their whole career. That other people come out and they're like, I have no idea. Well, that's the process of discovery, and clarity begets clarity. And one of the benefits of coming into midlife and moving through midlife is that you have this wealth of experience. You know what you're good at. You know your capabilities. You know what makes you excited, what gets you up in the morning, because you've had this wealth of experience that a 20-year-old doesn't have.
I will say a lot of the people that I talk to don't know those things until they pause. And now they have the experience and they have the data to go through and figure that out. But a lot of people don't spend the time because they're so busy doing what they think they should do, what they have to do, surviving, that they don't even allow themselves to know what makes them come alive.
And it's one of the things that I talk about in cultivating clarity. How do we cultivate clarity? One of the parts in the book I talk about is developing awareness. And it's exactly what you're saying, is that sometimes we get into life, we're so busy and wrapped up with our careers, with the kids, with just all this extracurricular. And if we haven't had, good boundaries before, we just get loaded. So one of the things I talk about is just developing awareness. This is a self-awareness. And the four practices we outline in the book is meditation. Big fan of meditation, reflection, just taking time to think back and look back on all that data that you're talking about and say, yeah, when I was doing this, I was so jazzed. Now when I'm doing this is totally energy killer, right? Just taking that time. Visualization, huge component, huge fan of that. Just taking the steps and taking time to see something really clearly. A lot of top performing athletes do that a lot. So in incorporating that, in prayer, depending on your background or religion, all those things help just take time for you to pause, to think, to have an attitude of gratitude, to look back and see. I think that's huge in midlife, because it's like you say, you do have that data, but if you don't ever access it, then it really doesn't help. So
it's funny. Sometimes I take people way to the beginning. I said, when you're sitting with your cup of coffee, put down your phone, turn off the news, and stare out the window, and we'll call that meditation. Right? That's your beginning meditation. The time you spend with your cup of coffee and yourself.
So good. It's so good. And people overlook that. People overlook that and think it's too simple. It's too easy. It's like, well, that was not going to make a difference. And yet that is huge. I mean, if you can develop self-awareness and be in the present, if you can just get to the present and clear out some of this stuff that's trying to take you time, it's just amazing in what type of clarity you can generate in such a short period of time. And some of the things that I was talking to a guy the other day, I was like, you're trying to control everything in your life that's out of your control. You're trying to control this, you're trying to control that, and none of that is in your control, and you're freaking out, you're having major anxiety. And the only thing that you can control is your response and your thoughts. And that's the one thing you're not controlling. I said, we've got an opportunity here. And so that, I think that's true. Developing awareness is a big part of clarity. But after clarity, everything flows from clarity, and we want to, develop boundaries. And the second thing is, developing boundaries. And the funny thing is that when we talk about boundaries, it's almost a negative connotation. You hear that, and I kind of unpack that a little bit in the book. Say, hey, boundaries is not, you think back to your school teacher, don't jump out of line, don't do this, don't climb on that, don't, and you're like, oh, that's a boundary, it's something I can't do, right? And so you kind of see it as a wall that's keeping you from something. And in the book, I talk about this. This is just totally an incorrect, frame of looking at boundaries. What boundaries do is it gives you the freedom to focus on what's most important to you. And I was reading that the only 10, some of the concepts in the only 10, sounds like you unpacked that really well, that concept, because it's not that you have to do everything. It's that you do what's most important well. And
that was a lifeline for me, because I have severe ADD. So for me, I'm Ricochet Rabbit. So it's ironic that I write and talk about focus, because for me, it's a life and death proposition.
Exactly. And it's super huge, because, if we know what we want and we can generate that clarity, I call it in the book, I call it a living visual, because it's living. It does change. And that's what, when you talk about midlife, what we see that we want today, if we're trying to still achieve what we did when we were 20, then we may have a problem, because we're different than when we were 20. Our lives are different. Everything's changed around us. And how are we going to pivot? Well, that living visual, that mental Polaroid that you have, it's okay that it's different today than when it was when you were 20. The main thing is that you see it clearly, and that you have something that you can move towards that's meaningful to you, because that's gonna give you that energy that you need to overcome some of the hurdles that you've got to go through and go over to get there. And so when we put out boundaries and we build those walls, I talk about it as like a city with walls. It controls, like if you think of an ancient city with these big walls, they put it up not to keep the people from leaving the city. They put it up so that these marauders don't come in and disrupt everything in the middle of the night, to control the flow, right? So we're controlling that flow when we put up good boundaries in our life, so that the activities that's most important to us, our families, our work, and all these things that are very important, that's what we focus on, and that's what we thrive. what we thrive in.
So we gain clarity. We decide to cull out and wall off the things that are unimportant, and set our boundaries so that we're focused on what we want to do. What's next?
Yeah. So then we want to elevate accountability, and this is a simple kind of next step that we can see after we go through and develop boundaries. If we've got this clarity and we've set the boundaries, now we want to see, hey, is what we're doing lining up with what we said we wanted to do, right? So it's just, do we want to continue with this? And I love the illustration. I think it was Stephen Covey, where these guys are cutting down the forest, right? And they're going through this forest and they're chopping wood and they're making great time. And this guy climbs the tree and he says, "Hey, stop production. You know, we're actually," he's looking out and he goes, we're cutting down the wrong forest. And they yell back up and they say, "Shut up. We're making great progress." Right. And so accountability is saying, are we aligning our activities, our boundaries and everything? And then the results that we're getting, are they in alignment with what we're trying to create? And I talk about, the difference in ideas, and knowing what we know. Like it's one thing to have an idea of something. Like it was kind of like that Tom Brady. You have an idea of what it's like to be a professional football player, to be the star quarterback of a. There's a difference in that and the actuality of it, right? And so there's a gap in our knowledge there. Sometimes we think we want this and we only see a part of the picture.
It's funny. I was watching a documentary on Lady Gaga, of all things. I was fascinated. It was right before her Super Bowl performance, and every single move where she says, "I need to come over here and then I need to set my breath so I can hit a note." She has to think about 5 steps before, so she can. It's not just I'm Lady Gaga.
Yeah,
she works as hard as Tom Brady.
Oh, it's incredible
to be in step with the dancers, set up her breath, and be able to hit a note. It's really incredible.
It's incredible.
So when you talk about the accountability, for me, I tend to tell people in my posse. I have a mastermind. I have people who I tell them what's important to me. So when I tell them what I'm doing this week or this month, or what am I doing for Q1 in 2019, they know what's important to me. And if I'm off of those things, because again, I have ADD, I like shiny objects.
Yes, right.
I'm a creator. You're a creator. I want to go create new stuff.
Yes.
That's not in alignment with what you said you want to do. Do you want to change what you want to do? Or would you like support to stay on track?
I think that's an awesome point. And here's what I would say. There's 2 things there. And we talk about it in clarity, that you should engage community when you're trying to develop clarity, because just in general, when we talk about clarity, there's light, focus, and frame, right? And so we only have a certain amount of, just because of our background, our experience, all this stuff, we see the world a certain way. And sometimes we just need that view widened. And when we have community that it can speak into us, just like what you were saying, it just gives us so much more insight. The second thing I would say is, one of the reasons that's important, and I talk about that in the accountability section, is the word detachment. And you don't really hear that very much, especially when you're talking about accountability. It's kind of a weird word. And you say, why would you describe accountability with detachment? And that is this. I would say this, and I speak to this in the book. It's like what you're in the grind, when you're blood, sweat, and tears into something, whether it's a business or your family, it's like a relationship, and it's terrible and toxic, but you can't see it because you're in it, right? But your friends are all saying, "Hey dude, get out of this thing. You got to get out of here, run for the hills," right? And you can't see it because you're like, "Oh, we're working through it. This is great. This is what it's up," right? And so it's think about it like a basketball game. You go into a basketball game, the coach is yelling, the players are taking the last second shot, the crowd's into it, the referee's making calls, 3, 2, 1, the guy hits the last second shot, he walks off the court, the announcer says, "Hey, how did you play tonight?" And the guy says, "We played great, we came together as a team, just what it took, we won by 1 point." Same game, last second shot, 3, 2, 1, he misses, they lose by a point. He comes off, the announcer says, "How'd you play?" "We just couldn't get it together, we just couldn't." Now, it's one shot at the end of the game, but that's how it's going. So when does real accountability happen? He can't see it because he's just given everything he had to win in that game, whether he wins or loses. The real accountability comes in when they turn the lights off on Sunday morning after the Friday night game, and the coaches get in a dark room and they play the film on the TV and they slow it down, they put it in rewind, they watch all from different angles. There's no emotion, there's no crowd, and there's an outside observer that's looking at the situation and going, you know what? We lost, but we played the best game of the season that we've ever played. Or we won and we played the worst game of our season, right? And so there's an element when we try to have accountability, and whether if we're doing that with ourselves or with our business or anything, it's so important that we first take time to detach from the emotion involved in the actual grind and the work and the blood, sweat, and tears.
Wow. Okay. So now we've done accountability. Now it's time for action.
Yeah, it's time for action. So now we've lined up, we've got our clarity, we've set proper boundaries. So now we're focused. We have a focus and an intensity on a very specific purpose. We kind of have the metrics in place, and we know how we're going to hold ourselves accountable. And so now we're going to intentionally execute. And so when we talk about execution, I really go through how we move and exploring the 5 paths. You talked about being a creative and to create. I have that as one of the 5 paths that we create movement: to restore, to renew, to order, to grow. Those are all the ways that we can move and create movement. And we talk about some mindsets. There's some neat things and stories that I have in the mindsets. One is prepare for opportunity. So whether the opportunity comes or not, you're prepared for it to take on that opportunity. Another one is slow is smooth and smooth is fast. I've got some military friends that say this all the time. I love it. And I tell this to my daughters. They're learning some musical instruments. And I'm like, hey, it's better to do it right and do it correctly and then speed up than just get through this lesson and do it incorrectly. So it's the same way with these are mindsets for execution. Right. So as you approach the execution, one of my favorite is those serve the work. And you spoke to this when you said you wrote that book for yourself. And it's a neat concept, and it's a neat mindset, is that instead of serving the community, we serve the work. And if we serve the work, it's by serving the work that we serve the community, right? So if I'm so worried about what everybody's thinking, and in the age of social media, this is so important because we get so caught up and we get so much visibility into a picture that people represent their lives to be. And we start thinking that we're supposed to do something that, they will like and approve, and my post gets, how many ever likes and things. Where in fact, what really serves the community and the world as a whole is if we're really focusing on the art of the craft. Am I producing something every day that's got value? Because that's only I can produce. If I'm living my unique, as only I can live, then there's meaning and purpose in that. And so that mindset of serving the work that I'm called to do is just really important.
And that is the most fulfilling and life-giving when you're serving the work. Again, even this podcast for me, every time I finish a conversation like this, I want to put it out in the world like 5 minutes later, because our conversation here to me was so enlivening, so exciting. And I'm not choosing people, and I'm not bringing this together in order to have a popular podcast, in order to be famous, in order to do anything. I'm really finding people I'm interested in, so I can learn how to be better at 56 years old and how I can help the people who are in my sphere. And if this thing blows up, awesome. If it doesn't, awesome. It's a legacy that I am so proud of. And it brings me such life. So serving the work to me resonates quite a bit, and it's the most fulfilling I can think of for anybody.
I agree. And it's definitely something that you have to be intentional about, and you have to learn, because it's not something that is part of the discussion right now. Maybe back when Michelangelo was making his paintings in the Renaissance, and that was a high value item in the culture in those days. And today I feel like that's a little bit of an idea that's been lost. It's a lost value. But it's so important. And it's like you said, it definitely is more fulfilling when you're doing something you feel like is adding value and really serving that work. So yeah. And the last thing I would say is that, this is kind of coming from the good to great is turning the flywheel. And I think this is part of the now what moment part definitely goes along with the midlife. Is that everyone, kind of says, okay, this has this up and to the right perspective on their life. You know, it's always has to be, and in fact, it's obviously not that way. But I think that, you know, it's ups and downs and forwards and backwards. But I think turning the flywheel is saying, okay, if I'm facing a now what moment and I've got some clarity, I need to move. Then the most important thing is not that I eat the elephant in one bite. You know, the most important thing is I just start turning the flywheel. How do I go from 0 to 1? 0 to 1, 0 to 1, because I'm always just moving 0 to 1. And so as I do that, and I just go 0 to 1, then I'm going to turn the flywheel and you know, take the first step, micro moves, win the day. These are all types of things that we talk about.
Plus one.
Plus one. And you can do that whether you're 20 or 45 or 55. It doesn't matter. We're always at 0 to 1.
Wow, this is brilliant. Thank you so much. The book is Move From Where You Are to Where You Want to Be by Dallas Burnett. Dallas, what's next for you? What big projects are you working on?
Oh man, there's a lot of stuff going on. I've got some things that's going on. Actually, I was talking to you about it in DC coming up, hopefully with some training with military and things like that. I'm doing some coaching and some consulting, so I'm excited about that. And I'm actually trying to upgrade some of my products and things online, and who knows, may have a second book in me. I don't know. I just want to get the first one out, but I've got some ideas.
I know you have a few more books in you. So tell me, how can people find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. You just LinkedIn with Dallas Burnett, and that's probably the easiest one. Or Think, Move, Thrive is a website that goes along with Move, and you can connect on the Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook with Think, Move, Thrive. So LinkedIn for Dallas Burnett and Think, Move, Thrive for everything else.
Okay, so Think, Move. I will put the links in the show notes, and I really appreciate you taking the time this morning to talk with us. The wisdom is just, so, you know what I like? It's wisdom, but it's absolutely specific action items. If people took notes on this conversation, there's something they can do today to add that +1. Dallas, thank you so much for joining us. And for everybody who listened, please, if you like this episode, please share it, please like it, please leave a comment. Reviews are definitely welcome. I love you and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you, Mark.